So before we start the video, I want to clarify a few important things. You immediately have probably noticed that something is very different from the previous video, and I want to explain why. Before then, I tried to implement a sort of documentary style theme. I decided to drop that. Here's why. I tried to make part 2 in a similar fashion how I made part 1. However, I realized I feel very uncomfortable doing it in the same fashion. And I just couldn't do it. Not only I felt out of my element, but I also felt that the language and the way how I constructed my script felt extremely clunky. And I realized this like at least 7 times, and I always had to change the script, and I never really felt satisfied. So you know what? I decided to fuck it. I'm just not gonna do that anymore. Instead, I'm gonna try doing this. By this, I mean sort of have this in a laid back fashion. More laid back, more like a conversation. Instead of a script, I'm gonna try to keep up the pace with my brain, which is probably gonna result in a lot of heavy editing in the video because there's a lot of information in my head, which I'm gonna try to distribute in this video in as much concise manner as possible. Now, as I said, there is no script. However, this is the first time I'm doing this in a, let's call it freestyle fashion, okay? I have some notes right in front of me, some cheat notes, so that I know exactly what I want to cover. I want to make sure that I don't forget about anything important, okay? Now, this does break the continuity of the style in which I have produced part 1, but this is the way I want to run things from now on. Guys, hopefully you're gonna be okay with it. If not, the complaints department is on my Twitch channel. You can go follow me there and tell me how upset you are, if you care at all. Anyway, in part 1, here's what we talked about. I talked about the narrative structure and also the imbalance of themes, basically 2 themes at once in the span of one single expansion. Not good, it didn't work out very well. I'm gonna start by talking now about another problem that was in BFA, and those were BFA's storytelling mediums. You might prefer the word storytelling devices. I think ultimately it doesn't matter so long as we are both on the same page. So a storytelling medium is basically, I'm going to try to explain this as simply as possible. It's a medium, it's an outlet or a tool through which the story is communicated to you, right? So the story is in the medium, and the medium tries to somehow communicate the story to you. One of the best examples in this case, and I'm going to use this for comparison a lot, is a book. A book is a storytelling medium. You have the story within the book. It's written. So the way how you interact with the story is that you read the text. And that's how the story goes from the book into your mind. In World of Warcraft, here's how it works. Now, officially, a video game is recognized as a storytelling medium, but I'm going to cheat a bit and I'm going to skip the video game part. Let's talk about what is the storytelling medium within World of Warcraft. So in World of Warcraft, the storytelling medium, there's not only one, there's more of them. There's quests, there's dungeons, there's raids, cutscenes, cinematics. In BFA, you could say it's also war campaigns, island expeditions, warfronts, stuff like that. There's also external mediums, right? You got the novels, you got the novellas, you got the audio plays, but those are external mediums. I'm not gonna count them in. Now, this is basically the parallel. What is the process of how a player interacts with the story? Let's use the book version. With the book, you have to read it. In World of Warcraft, you do the content. With quests, you got the quest description. There's the voice acting. There's also the environment around you, which can also play an important role. Sometimes the item is relevant to the story. Sometimes the creatures you have to kill are relevant to the story. There's really multitudes of skills and actions that you perform at once that you have to do to absorb the story through quests, dungeons, and raids, etc., etc., etc. And this is where gameplay starts crossing hands with the narrative. In other words, how are these features that I've just described designed? Because that is going to determine how are you going to be able to interact with the story contained within them. I'm going to start with quests. The reason why is because quests have been a staple of World of Warcraft since basically the video game's inception. Quests are the main way how the story is basically conveyed to the players. So what's the problem with quests in BFA? Well, we have to talk about the gameplay problems as well, because as I've said, the design of the quests, the design of these features determines how good also they are as devices to communicate the story to you. Well, what's the problem with quests? Well, the one thing I can think of is the terrible character progression as you level up. In other words, as you level up, all that power that you took from level 110 over time faded away. It's gone. That's not much of a progression. That creates frustration. Same with scaling. Problem number 2. As you worked on increasing the power of your character, you also improved the power of the environment around you. So you not only worked on yourself, but that work that you put into yourself also spread across your environment. Those creatures that you killed previously a few hours ago, well, now they're stronger than before. Now they're tougher to deal with. So really the curve of progression is not like this, because usually the content that you did like a few hours ago would be somewhere here. This is where you were before, but now they're here. So instead of going upright, the line is more straight. That's monotone. Not good. Now, of course, these problems that I have just mentioned, they're not as clear as when you do the quests for the first time. When you do quests for the first time, quests have the benefit of novelty. At that stage, you're curious, you're exploring what the quests are about. This is the time where you absorb the story the best. However, let's say you have alts. You do the quests again and again and again and again. Frustration begins to amplify and you start to resent the quests. What do we have, therefore? At the end, we have a lot of frustration, a lot of resentment. This is a problem because resentment, frustration, those are negative emotions, and those are distractions. Distractions are the last thing you want when you want to communicate a story. It makes it difficult to delve into the story. It also impacts how memorable the lore actually is. And when you have a stressful experience, justifiably, you want to avoid it. I would say that, at least in my opinion, when you have this frustration, when you have all these negative emotions brought upon by the quests, the main tool that is used by the game to convey the story, when you're frustrated at the tool, this is when your memory, the impact of the story starts to get influenced, because you have the negative emotion in between that distracts you and starts dealing damage, basically, to the impact and the memorability of the story that you have experienced prior. This also results in long-term doubts, because if you do the quests now and you think, well, if this is how quests are handled, what is it going to look like in the future? Next up, war campaigns. Similar thing. Here's why. War campaigns, they're basically quests. They're basically quests in their own category following a specific theme, so there's not much of a difference there. However, I did forget to mention one thing, and this is going to be important. Quests are ridiculously easy. It's not a joke, it's ridiculously easy. I pick up a quest, I open my map, and I find out that 80% of the job has already been done by my map. All the hard work finished. I'm not encouraged to think. I'm not encouraged to explore. I'm not encouraged to, let's say, analyze. It's just brainless progress. I'm running on a treadmill. I'm gonna go back to the book example. Let me tell you what would be the equivalent with the book example in this case. The way how you quest today, with the book example, gliding over the text quickly. You don't slow down, you don't think, you don't pay attention to details, you just turn page after page after page after page after page after you've reached the end. What do you remember? What do you know from the lore? Not much, I assume. So what happens is that this results in what I call a racing mentality, or speedrunning mentality if you want. When you realize the quests are so easy and you're able to go through them as fast as possible to reach the end, it sort of twists your perception, which convinces you that, well, there's no resistance in the way. The quest allows me to do it this way, so I'm gonna do it this way, and that way is easy. There's barely any resistance on the path. And this creates a problem. And that problem is that, especially in the war campaigns, you have a lot of roleplay. The reason why this is a problem is because you are there with your speedrunning mentality. Roleplay happens, which takes quite a decent amount of time, by the way. But there is no counterplay to it. The only thing you have, the only choice you have right now is you have to wait until the roleplay is done. And because you are embedded within that speedrunning mentality, you become frustrated. And what did we say about frustration? Negative emotion, an obstacle, a distraction, stressful experience. You want to avoid it, you ignore it or try to ignore it. This is annoying. Another good example for it is, this is on the Alliance side. In Tiragard Sound, there's a quest where you have a character named Flynn. I don't remember his second name, but he's a prominent character in the initial storyline of Tiragard Sound. There is a part where Flynn becomes extremely drunk and he starts making slow circles around an area. Now, when you do this quest for the first time, this is when the quests have the benefit of novelty. You might think, okay, this is funny, this is humorous, I like this little bit of comedy, I like it. But then you do it again on your alt, and again for the third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth. This starts to become so annoying that instead of appreciating it for what it was before, you start to resent it. This is the problem with quests today. But it's not the roleplay itself that's the problem, of course. It's the mentality of trying to race through the quest as fast as possible, which is brought upon by how easy the quests are. That's the core issue. And it's really unfortunate because with the roleplay, that is what supposedly carries all the gravity of the lore. And it falls apart because, let me give you another example. War campaigns, as far as I know, they're mostly trying to mimic this impression that you're running a small-scale operation in enemy territory. Something like a covert operation. But what is the point of scouting? What is the point when an NPC, a member of the story, emphasizes that we have to go here and scout, we have to go here and search for the enemy, we have to be slow, we have to hide, we have to keep low? What is the point of that? Guys, my map in the game is so smart, so omniscient. It already knows where to go, it already knows the name of the enemy, it knows where is what to kill, etc, etc, etc. If I had the option, here's what would make sense. I would rather go right in front of Halford Wormbane, the guy who basically runs the war campaigns, as far as I'm aware, on Alliance side, and I just give him my map. Like, here, talk with my map. Dude, this thing, this paper, this piece of paper is so genius. It's gonna win us the war. The Horde side could do the same, of course. So at the end of the day, the most powerful entity who runs the show is basically your map. And I find this ironic, especially there is this part on the Alliance side where you have to ask NPCs for like what suggestions they would have, what would be a suitable strategy. And there's this part on the Alliance side in the war campaigns with Chandra's Feathermoon. She says, when you ask her, what strategy would you recommend? And she goes like, just go in and fill them with arrows. Honestly, I find that not only ironic, but a perfect representation of what quests are today. And when I saw that, when I read that, I wasn't really sure if Blizzard was actually making fun of themselves right there, but I found it ironic. Next up, Warfronts. Where do I begin with this? So, Warfronts. Let's go back to the time where Blizzard announced Warfronts. What are they? That moment when they started to use the word RTS games, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, when they dropped these names and mentioned that they used these games right there as an inspiration for the design of Warfronts, here's what happened. Everybody who knew what Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3 was, the hype went over the roof. Because those games, that was my childhood, probably your childhood too. That was the golden era of Warcraft. So when you saw that orcish tech tree on the PowerPoint presentation screen or whatever it was, and Blizzard going like, this is the kind of thing that we're trying to go after with Warfronts, right? You were like, yes, dude, yes! Because, you know, you think about those glory days back then with the games, and now it's gonna be in BFA. Warfronts, here we go, dude. I'm looking forward to this. So, BFA releases, Warfronts open up, you step into the Warfronts, and all that hype that you have allowed to build up within you dead. Like that. That's a problem. When something disappoints you that hard. Why? Well, the problem is actually because Warfronts are terrible. I'm sure a lot of people can agree with that. Not to mention that you can't even lose in the Warfronts. There's no risk. So there's no need to be afraid. There's no really need to be concerned. There's no need to be on alert. because there is no risk. Ergo, Warfronts as storytelling devices, storytelling mediums, it just goes out of the window. There's no point there. Which is a shame, because I think a lot of effort was put into Warfronts. I think, you know, from the outside, they look gorgeous. But that's like taking an apple. Beautiful apple, by the way. You open it up. Uh-oh. There's rot inside. Tons of maggots. So much for the apple. You spent a lot of money on that. You were really excited for the apple, by the way. You really liked that apple. Well, that's a huge disappointment. Anyway, Island Expeditions. Probably not as bad as Warfronts, but they also had their issues. Repetitive boredom is one I can think of. You have to do them all over again, all over again, all over again, because really, as far as I know, Island Expeditions were one of the main sources of Azerite, and when Azerite was important, you would go to Island Expeditions and grind it. You would become tired of it, you would become bored. And what did we say about negative emotions? They're gonna stand in the way of you versus the story. It's not good. You don't want that. However, there is also one other issue here, and it has to do something with the writing behind Island Expeditions, the story writing. Somewhere in the early stages of the war campaign, you are told to step into the Island Expedition and gather Azerite, because your faction needs the Azerite. By the way, you have to gather quite a lot of Azerite in Island Expeditions, and when you do them over and over and over again, you kind of start to get this impression that, wow, like, my faction must have a lot of Azerite by now. And of course it makes sense. Because if you remember, in the Legion epilogue cinematics, you had Gallywix walk up to Sylvanas. He wanted to show her something, so they go behind the scenes. And then, when she sees Azerite, Sylvanas by the way, she goes like, you know, this will change everything.
This will change everything.
And obviously, this sets up the premise that, okay, dude, Azerite is gonna be serious. This is probably gonna be a game changer. On the Alliance side, it's Anduin wanting to sort of prevent the Horde from getting the Azerite, because apparently Azerite is extremely dangerous. Something can go wrong with it. We better keep it off of enemies' hands. And this is true, because in the early BlizzCon, I don't know which year exactly, Blizzard said that they associate Azerite with plutonium. So plutonium, Azerite. What do we know about plutonium? Plutonium is basically, it's a chemical element used to create nukes. Nuclear weapons. It's a dangerous mineral. So, if that's the inspiration that Blizzard took for the creation of Azerite, for the development of Azerite, well then, obviously, the first thing that comes into your mind is that Azerite is gonna give rise to huge, powerful weapons. We're gonna be fighting for a resource, boys, and we're gonna try to prevent the enemy faction from creating huge, powerful weapons. And who knows, maybe in patch 8.3, you might have thought that back then, we're gonna have an Azerite nuclear missile. Maybe that's how we're gonna get rid of the sword in Silithus. Maybe. Just maybe. But suddenly, somewhere halfway through the expansion, everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten about Azerite. Nobody cares anymore. Not even Sylvanas. No one. The only one who cares is Magni. And I'm thinking, what happened? Why did we suddenly drop our intentions, our goals? What happened to the "this will change everything"? Suddenly, "this will change everything" became "this doesn't exist." Like, we don't care anymore. That doesn't really make sense, because if this happened in the real world, basically it would mean, oh, we discovered plutonium, we made a couple of missiles, now let's forget about it. It's not that interesting. So dropping things out of nowhere for no reason, no explanation, nothing in the middle of the story, that's what happened. Oh, I'm going to be talking about that a lot in part 3, dropping things out of the window for no reason. Which is kind of curious, especially considering the fact that before BFA, and I think at the beginning of BFA, they also stressed a lot that Magni was heavily concerned with how the Alliance and the War is trying to fight over, Alliance and the Horde is trying to fight over Azerite, how it's hurting the planet and stuff like that. Well, Magni doesn't have to be concerned anymore because none of the factions care it anymore. And there was not a single mention in the writing, in the lore, where Magni would at least come up to us and say, whew, well, I'm glad at least these two factions don't care about it, now we can focus on the real shit. No, nothing like that. It just went out of the window for nothing. The real world equivalent of this scenario would basically be, let's say you go to work, you know, every day you go to work in this large, complex administrative building. The next day you go there, the building is nowhere. your job doesn't exist anymore. And there was no explanation behind it. And everyone who lives in the area, they just go about their lives as usual, as if nothing changed. Does that make sense? No. That's how it feels. This feeling of emptiness. That's how it is. So, these were the problems with the storytelling mediums. Boredom, a lot of negative emotions. When you have them, they impede with the flow of the story and your mind. Frustration is right here. It's like a blood clot. The blood starts flowing. Not a good thing. Now then, issue number 2.